Ryan Dreyer, my man, thank you for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate you.
Danny, thank you for having me, dude. I'm super pumped to be here. Can't wait to chat. Just can't even believe it. Like I said, I can't believe I'm seeing myself on the other side of the screen. I feel like I've seen this image of you and a lot of cool people. So I feel real honored to be on here with you today.
So, I'd love to start with the significance of the two dog prints on your bicep. What is the story behind there?
Yeah, dude. So I got a couple of paw prints tattooed on my inner right bicep here, and these are actually the paw prints of the dogs that I've had. So the lower one right here is Jameson. That's my current dog. He's 4 years old, my little chocolate lab. And then the larger one, the higher one up, is my black lab Guinness that my family had growing up. So I've always kind of wanted tattoos. I got these back when I lived in Nashville. How old was I? I don't know, maybe 24, maybe 23, something around those times. But I got these tattooed originally, and I've expanded them a little bit. Now they got some kind of mountain landscape drawings that line up with another one on my thigh. So that's the significance of those. I know you probably see them poking out on random Twitter videos and things like that, but that's what they're for. My homies Jameson and Guinness.
I feel like you have a connection from knowing you on Twitter. I feel like you have a connection to animals in some respect. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so I've just always been a big animal person. I mean, specifically with dogs. I've always loved dogs, and having that dog Guinness growing up, that black lab, like he was just such a foundational part of my family growing up. My siblings and I really gravitated towards him, and he was just like a rock solid dog. Like he was one of those 100 pound, 110 pound black labs. And I just feel like in any kind of chaos in our youth, like we'd always just have the stability of Guinness. So my love for animals probably began with him. Shortly after we had to put him down, my wife and I snagged our little puppy Jameson to kind of keep the love going. But yeah, I've always been a big animal person. I mean, definitely more related to dogs, I guess, as I'm in contact with them more. But totally something that I'm into, and something that I appreciate as I'm opening up my perspective to, some of the more beautiful things in life, and spending a little bit more time outside with my training, and just kind of welcoming, all the life on earth.
Yeah. And we'll definitely get to the training. But before we do, I want to talk about November 27th, 2019. You said you've met your hero, and that was Gary Vaynerchuk at Wine Library. I have a question for you, which is, why is he your hero, or why is he one of your heroes? And what did you learn from that interaction on November 27th?
Yeah, dude. So I appreciate you asking about that. I had the really cool opportunity to meet Gary Vee. A buddy of mine shared a Gary Vee tweet. I would have missed it if it wasn't for my buddy. Shout out to my buddy Adam. Gary just tweeted out that he'd be at his parents' liquor store. I think it was Thanksgiving Eve. And he, at that time specifically, was somebody that was really impactful on my life. I was a few months into starting my entrepreneurial journey. I began in around August of 2019. And I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've always wanted to basically use my own interests to, create a business of some capacity. And I've kicked around a million different ideas in my life, and never really thought about how I could actually like act on it and begin on it. It was always really the stereotypical, like, let's think of a business plan and let's think about, how we can change the world kind of thing. It wasn't so much like get in the nitty gritty, start doing something and start today. And so, I had known of Gary Vee for a while, and I'll happily admit that I fell into the school of people that like didn't really like him without really consuming his content. Like I only knew him surface level. I thought he was pretty brash. And I was just a little turned off, whatever. But once I actually started to listen to his content, I threw on a podcast of his. And by the second episode, I think that they were just two of his like short 10 or 15-minute ones. By the second episode, I had created the business Instagram account for my initial entrepreneurial journey. And I just continued to just be motivated and fueled by him. His content and his message and his story just really gave me a lot of motivation to start. And it gave me a lot of encouragement to continue those efforts forward, especially in that introductory couple of months. So to begin in August and then just have 3 months later in November, the chance to meet him I was like, screw it, dude. I'm in Philly. I got to jump. I got to drive an hour and a half. I'm leaving work at lunch. I got an emergency. I got to go meet Gary Vee.
Were there any particular takeaways from that interaction specifically that you hold on to?
I kind of laugh on it because I was so starstruck. Like I just, and that's all I could really get out at the time. I was just so amazed at the fact that I was standing there, with him. I told him about my business, and I basically told him that I really believe that I can do things. And this was especially true at the time. I've improved on this since then. But at the time, I was like, I really believe that I can do things. But like, when I hear Gary Vee say it, like, then I really believe. And then I really, really think that I can really accomplish some of these goals that I have in my heart and some of these ideas that have been kind of dancing around in the back of my mind for a long time. So that was what I spoke to him on. I got him to sign my book of his. I got a really, really cool picture with him. I was rocking a mustache in November, so I'll kind of always laugh on that and cherish that. But overall, it was awesome. It was super, super cool.
You said you've improved from, I guess, having more confidence in yourself to achieve some of the things you say you're going to do. Where does that improvement come from?
Yeah, so over the past like 2 years, I'd say I've really gotten into giving myself the chance to exceed my expectations and really seeking out challenges, both physical and mental, and always just biting off a tad more than I can chew, and just having the strength to withstand the pain and withhold, those lingering feelings to quit and tap out. And, with every instance, I sort of look at it like a step of stairs, like I'm building these steps that can go higher and higher and higher. And back when I was chatting with Gary Vee in November of 2019, I was, maybe the second floor of the house that I'm building for myself. And I'd say that probably now, I'm certainly a couple levels above that. And hopefully I keep building this house.
Okay, so what was the first step?
The first step to just chewing off probably more than I can get into.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of circle it back to when I got into road biking. That just really gave me the opportunity to like take down really cool stuff. Like to me, I'd always been somebody that got in the gym and I had no problem, getting into the gym 5 days a week and doing all that thing. But when I started to look into like true outdoor endurance exercise, like all of a sudden I was like, holy cow, like I'm out biking 30 miles. Like I've never really even considered doing this. At times I'd mess around like on a little stationary bike in the gym. And those things like are totally not comparable. So like any doubts that I had for myself, from like struggling through like a 4 or 5 mile ride in the gym compared to the outdoors is kind of funny to look back on. But it all really, really began physically. Those physical challenges of biting off big bike rides, starting to get into like ice baths and things like that to really challenge myself mentally, and really like allow those physical challenges to teach me that I have a lot more like emotional control than I understand and that I previously realized in life.
From my perspective, it seems like you are more into the endurance sports and the yoga and mobility and the feeling healthy today than you were, let's say in college or when you were working out 5 times a week, just lifting weights, it seems like. So talk to me about, do you believe that you needed to lift weights first to gain that confidence so that you thought of yourself as an athlete? Because I think that's an important part of the whole journey of becoming an athlete. I think personally, just wanted to, when I first started lifting weights, it gave me the confidence to then go into a yoga studio because I was confident with who I am. Do you think you needed that as well?
Yeah. So I guess like when I look back, I really try to always have the frame of mind that like everything that's happened to me is the best thing that could ever happen to me. So when I look back on my journey in health and in fitness, I look back and I'm like, all right, like these steps that I thought were missteps were ultimately just kind of sidestepping me ultimately in the direction that I've arrived to today that I'm really pleased with. So I think that it's really helpful that I built a foundation in the gym. That was just something that really resonated with me. When I first got into fitness, it was when I was 18 and my best friend and I, we did P90X. So every day after school, we were firing up those Tony Horton DVDs, and like we loved it. We'd be taking pre-workout, dancing around the house before getting into the workouts. And like it was just a way for me to like feel confident in myself in a way that I really never had been before. I've struggled with some weight issues for a lot of my life, and certainly in high school, kind of before I got into that, like I was a chubbier kid, a little overweight. I grew a little bit late. So when I was kind of looking around as a sophomore or junior in high school, like a lot of these guys are starting to hit puberty. They're starting to grow up. They've got facial hair. And I'm just like the fat little boy running around trying to like hit on the girls and having zero success. So and all of a sudden, like I had that team effort with my buddy, and I had the ability to like improve. Like that just became so foundational in who I am. And as I look like over the past 10 years of that fitness journey, as I'm now 28, like I just really appreciate that I've always wanted to get into the gym. Not everything has been dialed in for me at all times, but I've always wanted to like have that feeling of exercise because that gives me confidence. Like that's what it is. Like I love being fit. I love being healthy. Like I love being in shape. But like ultimately it's about like the feeling of who I am, and it's so tied to physical exercise, it seems.
What advice would you give to, let's say, a 21 or an 18-year-old kid who hasn't been to the gym before, doesn't consider themselves an athlete? What advice would you tell them? What types of things would you say?
Yeah. So my biggest thing with fitness is just finding things that you like. If you want to, say you have certain goals, say you want to like, I don't know, build a bigger chest, or you want to get more pull-ups, or you want to run a certain mile time. Like there are dozens of ways to get to all of those goals. And if you want to build the bigger chest, but you don't like doing bench press, like I'm not a weightlifting expert, but like there's ways you can get there. If you want to run a faster mile, but you don't like doing some certain aspect of that, like you can get creative with ways that you can make progress. And the thing that I have probably attributed to, most of my success is just approaching fitness with an open mind. Always being willing to learn from somebody. There are a lot of people, over my fitness journey that I've really leaned on at times and taken some great knowledge from. And it's kind of funny. It's like, all right, like I'll steal something from this guy for 6 months, and then all of a sudden, like I'll kind of just randomly phase out of it. But like then I'm kind of finding somebody else. So I think just finding people like that people can find some motivation from, or some knowledge from, or some encouragement from is super important. And then, ultimately it's just about having fun. Like being able to experience life in a healthy body is completely different than, the days, for me personally, the days when I wasn't healthy. I think that my mental health is completely tied to my physical health. So I encourage everybody to get healthy. I think it's kind of a holistic thing for me these days. Getting into the gym is one part of it, but the food is a huge part of it. The mental aspect of it is a huge part of it. The recovery as well. So when you realize that there are like a lot of different levers that can be pulled, I think that kind of opens my eyes and others' eyes to, the possibilities that there are.
You've mentioned that you have an open-minded approach to fitness. Where do you think that open-mindedness comes from?
I think it just comes from failing so many times when I thought that I knew what I was doing. There are times that, I don't know, I just sort of thought that I knew it all related to fitness. And, all of a sudden I'd stumble kind of ass backwards into another routine or strategy. And all of a sudden, like I'd have crazy success. Like one great example of that is like fasting for me. Like I spent a ton of time in my earlier 20s being the type of guy that would eat like 6 times a day. Like I'd have a big breakfast. I'd have, the mid-morning snack at work. I'd have lunch. I'd have the afternoon snack. I'd have dinner, maybe even an evening snack. And like that can totally work for people. But like for me at the time, like I wasn't as dialed in as I needed to be eating that frequently. And then all of a sudden, like I learned about fasting, and then I was like, whoa, like, holy cow, like I'm making huge progress here. And like kind of my whole life, I've been told that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and that I need to be constantly having food as fuel. So just like little things like that have really shown me, positive progress, have been a constant reminder that there's always new things to learn, and there's always new strategies that can work.
Yeah, speaking of food, you said and tweeted today that you think you would have been 6'5" if you didn't eat so much processed food. Where does that prediction come from? Were you just saying that tongue in cheek, or like What makes you
No,
believe that?
so like it's like half tongue in cheek, but it's half true. A lot of the men in my family are really tall. My
Mm.
dad is 6'4", or so. His brother is 6'5". My granddad on that side, I think, is 6'3", and I'm only 5'11". So it could just be kind of a random twist of fate that I didn't stretch out to the ways that I wanted to. But my younger brother's taller than me, and a couple of my cousins are now taller than me too. So I'm looking around like, wait, I'm the short one. But no, I was just really thinking that, in terms of really just how much I believe in whole food these days. That's been the biggest transformation in my life, specifically over the past few months, but really over the past 2 years. Just understanding the nutrient quality of real whole food and the lack of quality in so many foods that come out of bags. I had I would say probably like standard, what I would assume is a standard kid kind of diet. Lots of snacks, lots of things out of bags. I don't think that was anybody's fault. My parents did the best they could, and they did what they knew. But as I've come to learn new things, and I've come to have new discoveries with my own experience, having my children, my eventual children's nutrition pretty dialed in, is something that I'll definitely be cognizant of and make a priority.
So take us through a day of eating in your life right now.
Yeah. So right now, a really standard day for me is fasting until noon or so. And then that first meal is going to be really protein dense. So that's either going to be, somewhere from anywhere like 6 to maybe 10 eggs, upwards of some days upwards of a pound of beef. Those will be the two protein sources I kind of toggle between at the moment. And then I'll have a carb source if I've done the training that I think warrants that. So today I had 2 slices of sourdough bread. Sometimes I'll mix in a potato instead. I'll make sure to get some healthy fat in there, maybe an avocado, or more frequently, even just like Kerrygold grass-fed butter. I've really been enjoying, so that's kind of the standard template, is like basically a meat, a carb if necessary, and like fat included. I cook in coconut oil usually for eggs, so I get some good fat in there. There's good fat in the 80-20 beef that I use, and there's good fat in eggs, of course. Then post meal, I've really been enjoying having pineapple these days. I know that you interviewed our friend Sol Bra. He tipped me onto pineapple having, I think what's called bromelain. I think that's how you pronounce it. And it's an enzyme that helps break down animal protein. So I've been crushing pineapple these days. I'll have maybe a half a pineapple after a meal like that. My snacks in the afternoon, I snack on basically fruit or carrots is what I try to do. I'm really fortunate that we've got a really nice local market close to us in Philly that has these monstrous carrots, dude. Some of them are like the size of my forearm. And so they're pretty entertaining to eat. They're not the baby carrots that you see in the grocery store. So I snack on those, or maybe an apple or a banana. And then dinner, my wife and I eat dinner together. My wife's an awesome cook. She actually has been cooking a little more than me lately. But we'll most frequently eat either like a steak. We do salmon pretty frequently. She whips up all kinds of healthy recipes that kind of align with my nutritional framework. But a really standard meal would basically be like a steak, another form of carb, and another vegetable of some sort. I've been staying a little bit away from vegetables lately, oddly enough, not really out of intention, more just out of not having them and then almost sort of feeling like I don't need them. So focusing a lot more on that fat content and that protein content and that carb content.
You mentioned that you want to teach your kids the importance of whole foods and eating correctly. What are some of the most important things you would tell them or show them in raising them?
So the first thing that I would really care to teach my kids one day is just like the simplicity of having food that comes from the earth. Like, I think way too many people overcomplicate things. Like, I've fallen, victim to this so many times in my life, like reading the front of the label, believing what the front of the label says, the heart healthy, the American Heart Association approved, the low fat, the low sodium, like all these buzzwords that they use. Like, yes, we can unpack why those aren't really as truthful as they seem, but like, even more importantly, like, let's just focus on eating food in its natural form. Like, that's really what I do. I think it's super easy. And I really feel like I eat an unrestricted diet. Like as long as it comes from the ground, I feel like I can have it. Whether it's an animal food or, you know, a straight up food that comes from the earth. So that's the kind of philosophy that I'll eventually be trying to teach my kids. In terms of like some more tangible advice, I really, really try to stay away from added sugar. I basically don't have any added sugar. If I do, I basically make sure that it's like organic cane sugar. So one example of that is like a dessert that I really like are the Tate's cookies. I don't know if you've had them before, dude. They're
So
absolutely
good.
so good. So that's an example of like, that's something that I will have out of a bag. And the only added sugar in that is like organic cane sugar, which to me makes a difference compared to just the traditional refined sugar that's like added into cereals and all kinds of other stuff. Added sugar is one thing. And then the seed oil conversation is another thing that I've really gravitated towards. There's a lot of information out there on the dangers of seed oils, which are really just the processed vegetable oils. They differ, I guess I like to make it clear, they differ from like the extra virgin olive oils, the coconut oils, and the avocado oils. Those three are all cold pressed, but the canola oils, the soybean oils, the palm oils that are so frequently listed in the ingredients of processed food, those are really foreign to the body. They really trigger a lot of inflammation. And there's a lot more science on it that I've learned about and that, you know, I can unpack in kind of a longer form, like essay I've actually written a little bit about on my blog. But to me, like just on surface level, it's like so much of the country is unhealthy and so much of the country is eating processed food. And this seems to be the standard thing in processed food. Like, so for me, like that is just like the surface level, obvious indicator that I really look to stay away from. And as I circle back to the original question, what I'll try to be teaching my kids is hopefully something along those lines.
Yeah, when I first started getting into nutrition and stuff like that, what I noticed was that the oils were so dense in calories. Like they're a little spoonful of an oil would have a crazy amount of calories. And I'm like, oh my God. So I use Pam for the top of the stove top if I'm cooking on that. Is that kosher? What do you put on the top of a stovetop pan? What do you recommend?
Yeah, so I kind of stay away from Pam. You know, things can get really tricky when you look at calorie content because all calories are not created equal. If you think about just the breakdown of carbs versus proteins versus fat, carbs and proteins are 4 gram per calorie and fat is 9. I forget what the exact thing is in relation, but it's 4, 4, and 9. So that has kind of created this philosophy that fat is bad and that calories equal calories, which isn't totally true. I think it's a lot more about nutrient quality and calorie quality. So if I eat on the stovetop, I almost always use coconut oil these days. I use butter as well. You know, I don't totally know about the ingredients in Pam, but just for me personally, like that's something that just comes out of a factory that, you know, I can pretty easily avoid. So it's not so much that like I'm like afraid of that and think that it's bad and like would tell somebody that's having it like, ooh, that's harming you. Like I really don't like to say that to people and to preach that to people. I just more like to look at it like, yeah, you know, like, I don't know, coconut oil is sort of just as easy to use and it's a really healthy source of fat for you. So that's something that I would probably recommend.
What if you're allergic to coconuts?
If you're, are
What's
you
the
allergic to
second?
coconuts?
Yeah. What's the
You
second
are.
thing you would use?
No way. That's a funky allergy. Extra virgin olive oil would be another option. Butter would be another option. Ghee would be another option. I really just look at all of this and I really align with just the ideas of how we've eaten across evolution. So I just look at trying to simplify what goes into my body. A lot of people are afraid of butter. Butter just comes from cows. It's just pasteurized cream and salt, and people have been eating it literally for like 9,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that butter is really the problem in people's diets. So that's just one example of how I think kind of the messaging around it has gotten skewed. You know, even some of my family, they really gravitate towards the I can't believe it's not butter. And I'm like, that's got 12 ingredients in it. Like common sense wise says that when that goes into the body, that's more challenging for the body to know what to do with. So I just gravitate towards those simpler options. Extra virgin olive oil, easy option for sure. Avocado oil is a little bit more expensive. I don't really have that super frequently. But butter would be another option. Maybe if you're looking to have something a little more natural than Pam, maybe.
Dude, I love how deep you look into and research some of this stuff. One thing that I found when doing research for this conversation was that you actually found out that decaf coffee has paint thinner in it. Is that true? And how did you find that?
Yeah, dude. So decaf coffee has paint thinner. No one knows. We got to get the message out. So that was on my carnivore diet. On my carnivore diet in January, I could not have any liquids but water. Coffee is a bean that comes from the earth. That does not come from an animal, so I could not have that. So it just got me looking into decaf coffee options, and I think I learned about it on Ben Greenfield's website. Ben Greenfield is a knowledge powerhouse on this kind of stuff. And yeah, I'm trying to think, what is the name of the, I forget the name of the chemical that it is. I think it starts with a C, but regardless, it's the same chemical in paint thinner, and it's in basically every form of decaf, except for this Swiss water processed. So I learned that if you go to the store and if you just see a bag of decaf, if it doesn't say anything about Swiss water processed, then that means it was processed with this paint thinner extraction method. So that's just like another simple example of like something that I learned just doing a little bit of research on my own. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, well, like the Whole Foods down the street has the Swiss water processed decaf. So like I could just get that. It's sort of like just as easy as another decaf. And that's what I'll loop in. And, you know, like on the surface, like that might not make a huge difference, but I really try to do this across like everything that I do. So all of a sudden it's like, this is just one thing, but I sort of have 100, and I think that they're all kind of stacking up in my favor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the analytical approach you take. You know, you mentioned briefly that you did carnivore in January of 2021, and then you did vegan or plant-based in February of 2021. So talk us through some of your results from what you found in that experiment.
Yeah, so my results in both directions were super strong. I support people who pursue both diets. The biggest thing that I ultimately took away from all of that was staying away from processed food. I did not have any processed food on carnivore. Obviously, it's all coming out of an animal. But I guess, you know, some butter would be mildly processed or something. But really no processed food there. But the primary intention for me on my plant-based diet was to avoid all processed food. So I did have a few things that came out of a bag, but when they did come out of a bag, like I was super diligent about what those ingredients were. I had none of those seed oils. I had really nothing that I didn't know what it was. Like an example would be peanut butter. Like I would choose the peanut butter that's peanuts and salt, not the one that's got like peanuts, salt, molasses, a million other different things in it. So that was ultimately what I took away. Personally, on the carnivore diet, I actually felt better. It was really crazy. My body was, you know, as lean as I've ever been. My energy was super clear. I felt really, really good around the clock. And it was the first time in my life that I never had any bloating. So, you know, like I said, I've struggled with my weight before. I still struggle with overeating. And on the carnivore diet, for the first time in my life, like I would eat and all of a sudden my body would tell me that I was full before my brain had to say, Ryan, put the fork down. And I just, it was the coolest thing ever. I was like, there's no way. Like I've been struggling with this for 28 years. Like I figured it out. Like, are you kidding me? So I was so stoked about that. And then on the plant-based side of things, like I said, very minimal processed food. I did not go for any of like the fake meat alternatives. Like I totally avoided those. I had a little bit of a challenge keeping my protein up because I sort of flipped my protein and carb intake. Like on carnivore, it's all protein, no carb. On plant-based, anytime you're getting a protein source, it's basically coming with even more carbs. So I had a little bit of figuring out to do in terms of like my portion control and kind of reeling things back in from a consumption standpoint. But ultimately, like I said, you know, I support people on both diets. I think that if you're somebody like me who's really pursuing a lot of physical activity and really working out a lot, you know, I would say that animal protein is probably going to help you out a lot more than it's going to hurt you. But if you're somebody that just wants to be generally healthy and just wants to live a healthy life, you know, I think a plant-based diet is totally doable. You know, it's all for me about just staying away from most of that stuff that comes out of bags.
Have you found that people have reacted strongly to you one way or the other because eating and nutrition is such a religious idea in 2021. Have you received hate from one community or another or support that you didn't expect?
So I think that on the broader spectrum, people really appreciated that I came at it with an open mind. I didn't go in really trying to prove anything. I ultimately wanted to figure out how I could get my body operating best on both. And I think that messaging really rung true for a lot of people. I did get a couple of remarks from the vegan community when I was showing off my head to tail animal package. But ultimately all good. None of the, I'm sure I got a couple of eye rolls from the carnivore community when I was flaunting my plant-based food and flaunting my plant-based cookbook. But ultimately it was vast more love than any kind of skepticism.
Yeah. And so from doing this experiment online and documenting it, you have Zach Bitter, who I believe is the world record holder for the 100-mile run. He is inviting you onto his podcast. What was that experience like?
Yeah, dude, another opportunity where I'm just a bit starstruck. I just couldn't believe that. Like, that was the coolest thing ever. Like, Zach Bitter's been on Rogan twice. Like, he's the 100-mile world record holder. And he's hitting me up because I decided to fart around with these two diets because I kind of just thought that everybody was acting crazy about both of them. And so that was just such a cool experience. The interview with him was really cool. We did that a couple of weeks ago, and I think that's coming out in the next couple of weeks. But man, I mean, talk about proof and validation that just putting your ideas and your pursuits and your interests out into the world and just the type of opportunity that can come and welcome itself to you is just unbelievable. I mean, I know that you're a huge believer in that and that serendipity, I guess. But it's just unbelievable, man. I couldn't believe that I got the chance to chat with him. And I actually want to ask you now that I bring that up. So I'm a little confused on the idea of serendipity. I feel like I've heard you talk about that. Can you explain that to me?
For sure. So serendipity happens, particularly with the internet. It happens when you put things out there and you couldn't possibly explain a coincidence that happens or someone connecting with you. That is what serendipity is to me and how I think about it as it relates to the internet. It's like you put out these podcasts, you don't know who's going to like that podcast. You don't know who's going to be a fan of it or hit you up, and you don't know who's going to respond to it. And when that connection happens, I call that serendipity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense completely. There's something that I've been leaning on a lot over the past couple of months, just the idea that there are no coincidences.
Yeah.
And I recognize coincidences more and more frequently as I continue to like pursue these urges and these interests of mine, and ultimately all of these pursuits. So it's got me kind of thinking in a totally new spiritual realm than I've been in, in the longer part of my life. But it's really cool. And like, you can't deny it, dude, when you're in the middle of doing this stuff and you're out here in the arena, like you and I are, and all of a sudden things start coming your way. Like, there's just nothing to explain it to. Like, I don't know, all of a sudden, like, the world record holder of the 100-mile run is chatting with me about my diet. Like, I couldn't even believe that. And that's probably just sort of a highlight of so many other things that have opened up for me.
Yeah. So I say that meditation, whenever I've meditated in my life, I've noticed an extreme amount of coincidences happen where I'm like, wow, that's crazy. That's crazy. And so I tweeted that out and someone said, maybe it's not meditation that causes the coincidences. Maybe meditation just allows you to see that everything is a coincidence. And I was like, whoa, that is mind blowing.
Yeah, dude, I totally resonate with that. I feel like, I've dabbled with meditation a bunch and it's something that I'm always trying to work on. I was really good on it about 2 or 3 months ago. I was doing, 30 minutes to an hour some days. And those days specifically, like, it definitely gave me an opportunity to view things a little differently. And I just feel like with these coincidences that we're kind of talking on and with opportunity that presents itself, it always just comes back to having an optimistic outlook and really seeing opportunity that's there. If you're walking around in life and if you're pouting about the way that things are, like, it's really, really hard to see things come for you and to you. But when you're looking at life from an abundance mindset and you're looking at life from an opportunistic mindset, it's like, dude, you start doing things and like I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the universe. I don't know if it's God. I don't know what is going on, but something is helping me out when I start to listen to that thing. And when I notice those coincidences and then act on them, it's just like this continual, it's almost like walking on walking on the airport escalator compared to just walking to the person that's to your side, that kind of thing.
Yeah, one thing I noticed about you is you're so optimistic, you're so grateful, you're so energetic on Twitter and in this conversation and the ones that I've listened to. Where does that energy come from?
Yeah, man, that is something that's a little bit hard for me to describe. Like, I think I've always been kind of a happy and bubbly person. I've always had kind of like a goofy little, like almost like a girly laugh my whole life. My buddies about kind of always giving me crap about it. But specifically, over the past few years, I've really adopted an optimistic mindset. And I just think it's accredited to just the work that I've done on my own personal development. I've done a lot of reading on the Ryan Holiday books, his Stoicism trilogy, and that work and specifically Obstacle is the Way. My brother just read that the other day, so it's on the front of my mind. But that book specifically just started to really break my brain from the way that I had always been conditioned to maybe see things. And it just gave me the opportunity to be like, these great figures in history saw challenges that so many would have turned away from. And they just saw a way to view them a little differently and to figure out how to get them working in their favor, and figured out like what it was that they needed to do to turn their challenge into an advantage. And I just started to like implement that in my life a little bit. And like, dude, it's addicting. Like all of a sudden, like you start like putting out goodness into the world, and like so much goodness comes back your way. So then all of a sudden it's like, dude, why would anybody ever be pouting around about anything? Like, dude, even if I'm not feeling my best, like I'm waking up, I'm saying this is a great day. I'm saying I'm going to go chase my goals, and I'm thankful for my ability to do that. And then, dude, like that just all of a sudden starts to bring positive energy back. To kind of go on like a little bit of a rant in that direction is my wife and I watched this documentary like 2 months ago, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was basically this scientific documentary on the universe that basically explained that all matter in the galaxy is a form of energy, and we are all forms of vibrations that are continually growing on top of each other. And that really explained to me that like the energy that you put out, even though like in human contact day to day, like someone can go through life without recognizing that at all. Like if you tap into that, like you can really put out positive energy that then is rewarded back to you. And like the idea of energy, I just believe in so much. Like the funniest thing really like clicked for me is when I watched that video, then I related it, or I sort of thought back to my dog. So Jameson. So Jameson totally knows, dude, like if we're walking down the street, he knows if someone wants to pet them or if someone doesn't when they're half a block away before they do anything. Like he can just sense if there's a welcoming presence or if there's a dangerous presence. And I just think that humans have kind of contracted our ability to recognize that, but we haven't lost our ability to tap into that. So my job for, my own fulfillment and my own growth is to do as much of that positive affirmation and that positive contribution as I can. And like, I mean, dude, I see you doing the exact same thing. Like it comes right back to you. It does.
How do you tap into that?
How do I tap into just my ability to be optimistic?
Yeah. How do you tap into that, your dog's ability to recognize that? Because you said we have that in us. So how do you then tap into that yourself? What are the ways you go about doing that?
So I'm a little confused on how you're asking it. Sorry.
You're good. No worries. How, when you are looking at your dog and you're saying, wow, Jameson is incredible at noticing a threat there and is incredible at seeing the ways in which people are who they are in their core. What are the ways that you personally try to get to that place of being able to understand people before they even speak, or looking at people? Do you have any practices that you use to become more in touch with the universe?
Yeah. So something that I would really attribute this to is my friend and my coach, Zach Homel. He's really taught me a lot about this and just understanding the energy that I have and that I can create, but also being aware of the energy of others. Like this idea of energy has really made me cognizant of language. So for example, like if somebody's going to choose to gossip, like I start to view that as a negative energy. And I start to view that as something that will pull from my happiness. And that's just one example of that. But then on kind of the other side of it, like, all right, I have the ability anytime that I see somebody, I can ask them, what are you working on these days? What's something that you did recently that you're really happy with? Like what's going on in your life that you're pleased with? And that is an uplifting form of energy that can then uplift that person's energy too. And it can kind of bring my energy up too, almost like a little bit of a tugboat. And so that is just something that I've totally started to recognize, specifically with language. And I guess I would relate it to like thought patterns too. Like trying to catch myself and I fall victim to being too hard on myself all the time. I'm like my own worst critic. But I think on the other side of that is like some of the reason that I really have so much drive related to my goals. And so just like recognizing like, if I think anything negative, like that's okay and that's normal. But like if I dwell on that, that has the ability to pull from my emotional energy. And what I ultimately have recognized is that our energy is limited. So I need to be very cognizant of where I give that energy. And I do feel that I have so much energy now because I'm really diligent about what I give energy to. I think about a lot of people, sort of a normal life, like maybe you wake up, maybe you grab the phone right away, you start scrolling social, you welcome stressors, you hop right into the workday, you've got stress from your boss, emails from the nighttime, all of a sudden, you eat bad food for lunch. You've got drained energy in the afternoon, the evening, whatever, you go home, then, you're low energy. And then maybe your wife is nagging on you a little bit. And then maybe you've got dinner, but then you just throw on Netflix, and like all of this stuff is just taking from people's energies. So like, I really do what I can to establish practices in my life that like give me the peace and distance that I need so that I can put my energy into the things that matter most.
When you catch yourself in a low energy state, what's the first thing you do or think about to get yourself out of that low energy state?
Yeah. So if I'm low energy, dude, and this is something that I'm still trying to work on, but I like to just get outside. It's the easiest thing. Fresh air and sunlight is God's medicine to the human body, and the human mind. And, for me personally, it's like, just step away, leave the phone down, get outside, take a couple of deep breaths, maybe walk around barefoot in the yard, try to steal some of that positive energy from the earth. But just really like stepping outside, welcoming fresh air. Like fresh air is the biggest thing ever, I think, just for like happiness and for peace of mind and just for kind of peace and presence. And unfortunately, I think it's a little challenging for people in their day to day to get a lot of fresh air. So that's something that I try to do if I'm feeling a little gloomy. But if all's going well, then I'm getting a lot of fresh air, and then I'm not feeling gloomy. Like if I catch myself feeling gloomy, like I kind of start to look around and I start to look in the mirror and say like, hey, Ryan, you haven't been outside too much frequently. Like you got to go get outside.
Yeah, it all starts with awareness and finding that peace and presence, like you said. I would love to go to something that it seems like has given you a lot of peace and presence, which is running ultra marathons. And in particular, I want to highlight a quote from you, which you replied to James Clear in 2019 is, one thing I've learned from running ultra marathons: you can sprint, you can jog, you can walk, you just can't stop. So talk to me about that and how you've applied that to the rest of your life.
Hell yeah, dude. I love that quote. That was one of my first little viral tweets. Got a little love on there on a James Clear reply. But yeah, man. So I got into running ultras this past fall, and I ran a 50K and then quickly bit off 100K with another friend of mine. We ran as trail buddies. And what that 100K ultimately taught me was just that you need to just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Ultra marathons are really fun and really cool and really unique. A lot of people see the big numbers and they think that it's crazy to take on that kind of mileage. But what a lot of people don't know is that a lot of times in ultras, like if it's a really steep hill, like you're walking up that hill, like you're regulating your heart rate the whole time. you're running when it's flat, you're running when it's downhill, but sometimes it's super steeply downhill. So like you're kind of just stepping down the hill and making sure that you don't fall or screw up your ankle or something. So that run and that event for me, like it took us 18 hours and 36 minutes. It started at midnight and we ended at 6 p.m., 7 p.m. the next day. And that was just an absolute grind of a physical performance, like nothing I had ever done before. And what got me to the finish line was just continuing and committing to myself to cross that finish line. And as I think about the other areas of my life, like that really made me think about like my business efforts and other things that I'm trying to build and work on. And it's like I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, like I can be my own worst critic or my own harshest critic. So I really try to take, that frame of mind to keep going. And I almost like try to look at it backwards. And I try to like say like, look how many steps you've taken, dude. Like, look how much you've built since November of 2019 when you met Gary Vee. Like, look how much you've built even since you ran that ultra in October of 2020. And like, look where you are now. So I originally used that idea as a way to keep propelling myself forward. But I've almost reverse engineered it because now I don't really need a lot of help going forward. Like I know I will. Sometimes I run into the issue of not thinking that I'm making enough progress going forward. So that's kind of another thing I'm working to figure out in my own mind. But the idea of just continuing to take steps forward and continuing to try new things, it kind of relates back to what I said about the fitness journey, like seeing who I can learn from, seeing what can I pull from this person from a few months, what can I do from this person for a few months. And again, as I mentioned a second ago, like I'm kind of looking at it backwards now, because that's ultimately what it all is. Like, I know I've seen you put stuff out like this too, but just the idea of committing to the consistency, like that's what success is. Success comes, it's just inevitable if you don't stop, right?
100%. And so I'm curious though, that 18-hour ultra marathon that you did, what was the lowest point in that journey?
Man, the lowest point in that journey, it was probably at aid station 5, last aid station. We had 7 miles to go. It was kind
Oh
of
my God.
I'm running this race. It was 100K. It was 63 total miles. And it's like, there were 5 aid stations and all of a sudden it just became normalized. Like, okay, it's a half marathon to the next aid station. Like, this is insane. This is so comically insane. And when we arrived to that 5th and final aid station, man, oh man, I wanted to lay down and I wanted to I was like, all right, I just need 5 minutes. Like I just need 5 or 10. And I'm so thankful. There were some people there working the aid station that were more experienced in ultras than me. And they said, no way, keep moving. You're going on. Here's some fuel, but do not stop. One of the coolest quotes I've ever heard in my life. I don't think I'll ever forget it. One of the guys at that aid station, he said, it hurts the same whether you go fast or slow, so you might as well go fast. Man, oh,
what a bar.
now you're giving me no choice. Ain't giving me no choice. But yeah, ultimately we made it through. It was cool. Like we had time checks for each aid station. Like if you didn't make it to the aid station in a certain amount of time, you got pulled from the race. So we built up a lead on the pace. My buddy and I, we built up a lead. At some points we were like an hour and a half, almost 2 hours ahead of pacing. And then, dude, that 7th aid station came and we crossed that finish line with like 24 minutes to go and 24 minutes to spare. But ultimately we made it happen. It was a beautiful experience. And it just taught me a lot about myself and what I'm capable of. It was really cool for me to just basically have that opportunity to compete and to prove to myself that I'm a lot more capable than maybe what I think.
Was that the best sleep of your life?
Man, I'll tell you, my mother-in-law is an absolute saint. When she, when we got back from that race, she had ordered a professional masseuse to come to my house. So this dude out the kitchen table, dude, put out his bed. I laid down on the kitchen or on that bed in the kitchen, and this dude just wrung me out. So the sleep was great, but like, dude, from the recovery aspect, I'll never forget that massage. That was absolutely unbelievable. My body was in just a state of shock. So it needed a lot of love. And this was like an ex-army guy. Like, dude, this guy had man hands. He was just gripping me apart. It was so good. And
you've since done other crazy events in the past since doing that first one. Did you do the 4x4x48, which is 4 miles in 48 hours. You do 4 miles at the end of every 4 hours for 48 total hours. So it ends up being 48 miles, right? So,
Yeah.
so you did that before or after, and how'd that experience go?
Yeah, so that was after. That was I think that was in like early March, maybe. I forget the exact day. But my wife and I did that together. That was crazy. That was my wife's idea. My wife loves David Goggins, and that's the challenge that Goggins puts on. So that was wild. I mean, that was a totally different type of challenge because with the ultra, like you only got to start once, and then your goal is just to keep going.
Mm.
And the 4x4x48, like, dude, you got 12 times. You got to get back on that line. And every time, dude, we never had more than 2.5 hours of sleep. So it was really challenging. It was a really, really fun experience to do with my wife. She did some legs were biking in the basement she did. So I was doing running the whole time. So a lot of my runs were solo. But the fact that like I had her to, all right, babe, it's 3 a.m. The alarm's going off. We got to get up and we got to get moving. Like to have someone there to do that with as a partner was amazing. And that was just a cool experience. Like that was really cool to just kind of teach me that like there are still so many different ways that you can challenge yourself. Like the way that challenged me was way more mental than physical. Like the 4-mile runs weren't that big of a deal. I was running them pretty easy, and they never took me more than maybe 35 or maybe 40 minutes max. But it was just like the constant repetition of it. I will say the coolest thing about all that was just like that weekend was just an event. Like I was on that whole time. Like there was no, here's the workout. Now let's putz around for the day. It was like, here's the workout. Now we're done. If we need a little bit of food, great. We have to stretch, of course. We're probably going to sleep pretty soon. Like just kind of managing all of that. I sort of felt like, I see some of these like endurance experiences where like people have like van crews and they're kind of all around, helping people along the way. I feel like we kind of got to do that within our own home for that job, I guess.
Yeah. So you haven't always been like this. It seems like this extraordinary endurance athlete. You've created this persona yourself and created this person. So what have the people around you said about this whole new Ryan?
Yeah, dude, it's really funny to like kind of engage with people and just kind of like understand how people are viewing me these days and understand what type of influence I'm having on people. My family specifically has really been, warmly receptive to all of my personal growth through this, which has been fantastic. My brother specifically got into road biking really shortly after I did. He just did his first 50-mile ride a weekend or two ago. So I was super proud of him for that. My mom has been biking a ton too. So that's been really cool. My sister's crazy. She's like she was in the Peace Corps for a while. She just traveled back to Africa to finish up a Peace Corps job that got interrupted because of COVID. So she's on her own path of personal discovery and personal growth, but has really relayed to me that a lot of my growth has helped her learn more about her own experience. And then in terms of like my wife's just been absolutely awesome in all of this. I think that the biggest thing for me in all of these endurance challenges and all these physical pursuits is that it ultimately just gives me mental peace, and it helps me be stronger mentally, and it helps me become a stronger man and a stronger leader in my home with my wife. And it did not take long at all for my wife to recognize that, and my wife to kind of organically follow along. It's kind of funny. Like I willingly admit, like, dude, I used to be kind of an asshole about my wife working out. Like I used to be kind of the guy that was like telling her to get in the gym and that kind of shit, which, I'm not super proud of, but it's just who I was at the time. And it's really funny because as I've gone into this endurance world over the past two years or so, I've really become a much more peaceful person and a much more understanding person. And in all of that, dude, she followed right along totally organically. And now her and I are doing our first triathlon next week. Like I said, we did the 4x4x48 together. So it's really cool to have a partner involved in all this.
That's so beautiful. And about the peaceful part, do you think that's a direct result of all the endurance training you've been doing? Is there anything else you would add to why you've been more peaceful today than you were, let's say, 5 years ago?
Yeah, so I think that like the peaceful aspect of it, like what the endurance training really gives me is solitude. Like it gives me that opportunity to be out on a bike ride for 4 hours by myself. Like I don't rock any headphones. It's just me and my thoughts. Just me and myself talking to myself about continuing and pushing, and you can do it. And, thinking about what's on my mind and understanding just really what's going on in my life and having that opportunity to just spend time alone. So I think that I would really pair it with, like, on one end is like the endurance training and the fact that I've decided to spend so much time in physical discomfort alone. And then also, like, really just what I've been into. Like I said, I've really leaned heavily on stoicism over the past couple of years. Just learning that there are ways to improve my thinking, and learning that there are ways to become more emotionally controlled, learning that there's, the ability to control my reactions, and really understanding, I guess the biggest thing for me has been what's in my control versus what's outside of my control. That Ryan Holiday book, Obstacles the Way, really, really just broke my brain on that. I used to be the guy that was like stomping my feet at random things that would happen in life that like might seem challenging to me. But once I really separated the idea of what's in my control versus what's not, I really learned to be at peace with what's not in my control, because I can't control that. So why would I, this comes back to the energy thing. Why would I waste my energy getting bothered at something that I had zero role in creating or developing or unfolding? What I can do is I can be smarter about my energy, and I can use my energy to control my own emotions. Like, I used to really, really struggle with anger. Like, there's a lot of anger in my family history, and I was taught that growing up a lot. It's what I was surrounded by, and it's what I knew for most of my life. And so I've had to use a ton of that energy to like wrestle this bear of a man that's been inside of me, that's for so long like tried to outlash at the world, and thought that being angry is being alpha, and being raged and being loud is how to establish dominance. And now I'm like, no, dude, no, like being calm and being peaceful and having control over myself, like that is ultimately what's alpha, and that is what is successful in the world, and that's what provides me with peace. Ultimately just recognizing that nothing can shake me outside of what I choose to allow shake me.
What would you tell that angry Ryan to do if you were speaking to him today?
Yeah, I would probably just tell that guy that there's another way. It doesn't have to be like this. I'd probably say, like, you've seen this your whole life. It's not your fault. It's not anybody's fault, that this is what you've been exposed to. But if you want a happier life, a calmer life, a life where you have more energy to pursue those dreams that maybe you're not acting on at the moment, like, dude, all you got to do is just point that arrow in a little bit of a different direction, and you can really capitalize on some of the holistic goals that you have for yourself.
And what do you think he would say to you?
Probably tell me to F off. No, I don't know what he'd say. Let's see. I'm trying to think back to like how I would take advice back in the day. I didn't really have a lot of mentors when I was growing up. I think that's something that I could have really used. I'm like I said, everything that's happened to me has been the best thing that's ever happened to me. So I don't look to change that in any way. But something that might have, made my path easier or sent me on an easier path, would have just been having somebody to kind of guide me in the right direction. I sent out a tweet the other day, actually. It might've been today, that was kind of along the ideas of having like the anti-role model, and having people that you don't want to emulate, or seeing people in life positions ahead of you and saying, hold on a second, that doesn't seem so great. That's really not where I want to head. I'm really appreciative that, at some point in my life, I recognized that, and I just started to move in the opposite direction. I think that what that really allowed me to do is that really allowed me to still trip over myself where I needed to. It still allowed me to make mistakes. I messed up tons and tons of times. I got in tons of trouble. I really have, had challenging relationships that I played a huge role in. But ultimately, all of those instances have led me to be the person that I am today. And I'm really happy and proud of that person. So that's just kind of how I think on the whole thing. It'd be so funny to think about how I would talk to myself back then. I really resonate with, I think that I'm sure you've heard this, but, and maybe you could even tell me where it came from, but I've seen somewhere, probably Gary Vee, honestly, the idea of making your 8-year-old self and your 80-year-old self proud.
Yeah, it's a tremendous idea. And when I think about often, I don't know the origin of it, but it is something that if it stays with you, you'll really find a sense of peace and presence from that. You mentioned the coach aspect of it and the importance of having a mentor. And you've hired Zach Homel, I believe. Talk to me about that experience. What has that shown you or taught you about life?
Yeah, so Zach has been an unbelievable figure in my life. He's been somebody that I feel like I've needed my whole life that I haven't had. I kind of view him as a big brother of mine. Um, I hired Zach as my coach back in November, and I came to him with the goal of ultimately increasing my social media presence and building a coaching business related to fitness, related to health, related to mental health and physical health. And over the past, what is it now, 6 months or so, Zach's really helped guide me in the right direction of making that come true. But he's also just given me the keys to pull out of me what I can feel inside that I don't totally know how to get out. Zach has just got an unbelievable way of kind of turning keys on locks that I didn't even know existed, and just a way of presenting information to me that just makes so much sense in my life. Zach's a really powerful and strong man, and he's built a really fabulous home for his wife and family out in Indiana that I really, really admire. I got a chance to go on a one-on-one retreat with him back in February where we spent some time together. And that was just one of the best weekends of my life. Like, to be able to just be with someone for, 48, 72 straight hours and just have the constant conversation, be surrounded around growth and how, we can be better, and how life is unfolding, and how we can really view things, and how we can just grow from each instance that comes to us. I think that one quote of Zach's that really like hits home who he is, and really what he's about and what he's provided to me is he says something along the lines of, people think that wisdom comes from age, but wisdom, or people think that wisdom comes from experience, but wisdom actually comes from perspective on experience. And so Zach has really helped me like look back at things in my life and kind of view them from a more positive lens, and recognize kind of where I've been aided and helped in ways that I maybe initially viewed as struggles or challenges that kind of screwed me up or something like that.
When you say he unlocked certain keys that you didn't realize were there, or unlocked certain locks that you didn't realize, what is an example of that, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, so I guess like one thing that Zach and I really spoke on in the beginning was me like trying to build this business, and trying to understand like who it is that I want to be. And Zach just kept pulling out of me like every direction that I wanted to go. And he kept encouraging me to be every part of me. And he kept encouraging me to talk about the dog business that I have on the side, and then talk about the fact that I'm married, and talk about the fact that I have a corporate job, and talk about the fact that I'm doing these endurance sports on the side. Whereas like my view was more like, I need to be endurance athlete, I need to be nutrition guy, I need to be coach in that capacity. So that's just, ways that he's really like provided a new lens for me. And what that has ultimately done, and what probably answers the question a little bit more directly, is that has really like turned the key on being like, okay, well, hold on. I've been thinking that my endurance training and my stoicism reading has allowed me to become a more peaceful person and a happier person. But really what's been going on is I've been using both of those, but I've been applying them in my marriage, and I've been being more open with my wife about what's bothering me at the moment and what's giving me anxiety or stress. And that's then encouraging her to do the same. And then our relationship improving in that direction is then allowing me to have the peace of mind to, I guess, achieve stronger performance in my corporate job. And then all of a sudden I'm recognizing that certain things are going on in my corporate job that give me the opportunity to improve somewhere else. So it's kind of like just connecting all these little dots. That's something that I just really appreciate that Zach's done for me. And that probably is a little bit of an answer on what kind of keys he's opened in doors for me.
Seems like the connectedness of all different facets of your life is what you're talking about. I'm curious about, why did you decide to put yourself out online to begin with? I think that it's something that a lot of people struggle with, and just taking that first step when they've been living as something else. and now they're going to put themselves out there online and talk about their experience, talk about everything they're doing. Why did you decide to take that step?
Yeah, dude. So that was something that like I thought of for a long time. I sat there in my mid-20s, really normal corporate sales job, went to college, got a sales job, did well, got promoted, got a new job, got promoted. I'm like, all right, I'm doing all these things right, but like this doesn't feel right. Like this isn't it for me. And I'm listening to all these Joe Rogan podcasts. I'm listening to these Cameron Haynes podcasts. I'm listening to these Jesse Itzler podcasts. And I'm just hearing of all these different people that are just doing these amazing things. And I'm like, I can do that. I know I can do that. And so ultimately it came down to those Gary V episodes that decided to just have me say, screw it. I'm going into something. I'm trying this. I'm making something happen. And it was really, really challenging at first. Like at first, I was scared shitless. I was really concerned with what I put out. I was concerned about people judging me. I was concerned about judging myself, which I definitely was doing. And all of those things, like I still definitely, have some lingering reservations that like I'm trying to still dismiss and work on. But ultimately, like I try to lean into the serendipity of it, like we mentioned, and the opportunities that have presented themselves. Like I just can't even believe that like the fact that I did the carnivore and plant-based diet led me to talking to Zach Bitter. Like the fact that I did anything is all of a sudden like creating a community of people that are interested in my pursuits. And I'm getting, just earlier today, a guy tweeted at me and said, I just did a 72-hour fast. He's like, how'd your fast go? I was going to do 48, but I saw yours, or he was going to do 24, then saw mine and now I was doing 48. And he's like, you know what, dude, I think I'm going to keep going to 72. Like that in itself is absolutely amazing to me. Like I need to, at some point I needed to focus on those things more, as opposed to thinking about like people judging me and people from my past being, all up in my business. Thinking about the concerns that I had of people that I maybe haven't even spoken to in a number of years, like feeling judged by those people. Like those are all obstacles that I've had to overcome in my journey to sharing more online. But that's just kind of my philosophy on it. And ultimately what got me started is I just listened to enough Joe Rogan that I was just like, dude, I can be one of these people. I can do it. Like, I know I can. And I don't know. I think I'm on my way.
You definitely are. How did you overcome some of that judgment from yourself or others?
I have to just say that my wife has just been an absolute rock star. Like she is so supportive of me in everything that I do. If I didn't have her support, I'd like to think that I'd keep going, but man, oh man, would it be a lot harder for me to do it. Having her in my corner is just amazing. And just like continuing to build my home is something that's super important to me. Right now it's just my wife and my dog and I, so we just got a little trio of us, but like, it's super important to me that we do things as a family and that we establish a really, really strong, loving home filled with laughter and joy. And so, as I push all this stuff on social and as I share, very personal things about what I'm doing, I ultimately know that none of that is more important to me than the love that I'm building in my own home. And so, as long as I continue to work on that and I continue to grow stronger roots on that, I just feel even more confident in myself to keep sharing online. And I mean, dude, just the fact that like you and I are talking right here, like this is the coolest thing ever. Like, we're totally different parts of the world. And here we are just chatting on what I've been up to and ultimately just improvement in general. And I just think that that's amazing.
What does your wife say when she is supporting you?
What does she say when she's supporting me? She just says, okay, pretty much all the time. Like she's, when I say that I'm doing something nuts, she's just like, okay, like I know you're going to do it. Like she's seen in me enough that if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. So she's, come to learn that there's no reason to like question what my goals are and what my interests are. And I guess I would say that like ultimately being very honest with my goals and my interests and having that own personal commitment to fulfilling those and pursuing those and achieving those. Like, I like to think that I make it decently easy on her to just continue to tell me like, keep going, like keep doing it. And of course, like the success along the way is amazing. Like just across the finish line of an ultra, back when I did that for the first time in September and then did it again in October. And then, all of a sudden she started running trail, she's run a couple of trail half marathons. So now like we've started to have like the push and pull of it where like I get to be the coach and the supporter for the day. And it's just sort of like created a little bit of a feedback loop where like now I just feel like I'm leading the charge. Like now I just feel like I'm leading the Dreyer home in a direction that I feel super strong about. And I think that gives her the ability to fulfill her role in the home. I think I've learned a lot about like the masculine and the feminine roles in society, and I try to really deconstruct them to myself. And I've really come to learn that like as I get more rooted in who I am, and as I continue to attack my life with vigor and with purpose and with passion, like that allows her to fulfill her more feminine role, which she really loves, of being maybe like the provider and the caregiver in the home, who's making those beautiful dinners for me, who's keeping up with Jameson's vet appointments, who's doing things of that nature that I ain't good at all. But then at the same point, like she's seeing me do this stuff. So like she's getting to tap into like that masculine energy that she's got inside too, where she's like, shit, I can go run a half marathon. Like I can go take down something that nobody else thinks I can do because I think I can do it. So that's kind of like what's in my mind in terms of like how this little dynamic in the home is working. I try to deconstruct it a lot, and I think I'm making some progress, but it's just fascinating to think about for me.
Okay, so let's say the scenario of your wife and she's running a marathon right now and you're about to ship her off to the starting gate. What are some of the things, or what would you tell her right before she's about to go to the starting gate and start her marathon?
Yeah. So my biggest thing is just saying that she can do it. Like I just say over and over again, I believe in you. You can do this. Like you can do it. Like you will do this. And it's funny, even her last half marathon, like it really did not go as she wanted. She ran the first like 9-ish miles really, really strong. And then she got kind of tripped up and she really banged up her knee. And she really, really struggled on those last 4 miles. She sort of limped across the finish line, and she was a little bit discouraged with how she did, and a little upset at her performance. But at that point, like I said to her, like, babe, these ain't always going to go how we want them to go, but like, look what you just did. Like you just dug so deep and you just crossed the finish line. Like, this is amazing. Like, this is what it's all about. Like, not every race is going to be a home run, but the fact is you signed up today, you showed up today, and you did not quit. So I try to say that first message on the front end, but then the message on the back end is even more important, right? Just being that providing support, just continually telling her that I believe in her. I think that we could all use a little bit more of that, more friends sharing that with each other, but that's what I'm about when I'm coach for the day.
I love it, man. And finally, what would you tell someone who's pursuing the highest version of themselves?
Yeah. So what would I tell someone who's pursuing the highest version of themselves? I would say that you're always going to give yourself a little bit more chance to believe you're on the right path by biting off more than you think you can chew. And you just really need to believe in your ability to do it. And if you don't have a lot of self-belief at the moment, then your job is to put yourself into positions where you can establish more self-belief. For me personally, like ice baths have been a cool thing. That's just been a quick way to hop in there and dude, my mind wants me to get out immediately. But like I push through, and then all of a sudden by the second minute, like, holy cow, I'm comfortable and I'm okay. And I relate that to my physical training too. And I just think about, the challenges that I've chewed off, and I just think about how impactful that's all been for me. So anybody that's looking to achieve their highest version, I would say that there's definitely a physical aspect to it that can really improve the mental aspect to it. And when you figure out how those can both work in your favor, like, dude, you're set up for success.
I love it. Where can people find more from you, Ryan?
Yeah, dude, absolutely. So easiest ways to find me are definitely online. I'm on Twitter at Ryan V Dreyer. I'm on Instagram at DryerSheets21. I do have a website, ryandryer.net, though the socials are a little bit more active and regular. So yeah, anybody that's looking to learn from me or looking to hit me up, I just love chatting with people on all this stuff. Anybody that's interested in following along with what I'm doing, or asking questions that maybe I can give some advice on, I'd be happy to help.
Ryan is an incredible follow. I highly recommend for a dose of positivity, a dose of pursuing your highest version. If you enjoy following me, if you've made it this far in the podcast, I'm sure you're going to enjoy following him on Twitter as well. Thank you, Ryan, for this incredible conversation. I am better off for it, and I'm just really grateful for you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Danny. This has been an absolute blast, dude. You're a rock star interviewer. This has been so fun.